Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.
This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I am Sam Abu-Al-Samid.
So it's episode 19 this week, and as the Automotive News Engineering Awards come in, I've been watching Twitter about that, which is fascinating. It's going to give us a bunch of stuff to talk about in upcoming episodes. But we have some things this week to talk about, and of course we'll start with the garage or the driveway, and I'll go first because I have the most hotly anticipated vehicle in my driveway this year. No, that's not true. But
you got yourself you managed to find a supercharged Toyota Previa all-wheel drive.
That would be cool. This is not that. No. I've got
a supercharged mid-engine all-wheel drive minivan. It could be better.
The Previa was cool. The only thing that was cooler than the Previa was the previous Toyota vans, which I forget what they were called in the Japanese market. Here they were just like the Toyota van, but they were super neat. But no, I have a current Toyota van. I have a Sienna Limited all-wheel drive. And in the past, I have recommended the Sienna as the best minivan sort of for your money of the crop. That past was before the Chrysler Pacifica came out. That is currently, in my opinion, the leading minivan. It just does everything very well. It's very well thought out. It looks great. It's very comfortable. It drives excellent. And the Sienna was my former top pick. It's still good, but boy, does it feel old now. All of a sudden.
Well, it's at this point, especially with the new Odyssey coming in the next few weeks. In fact, they're doing the immediate drives beginning of May. The Sienna is actually the oldest of the current crop of minivans, and it'll be due for a redesign probably in the next year or two. But just before you go on and describing it, I just consulted Wikipedia, the fount of all human knowledge. And the predecessor of the Previa in the Japanese market was known as the Town Ace and the Master Ace Surf.
Master Ace, that's what I recall. And you could get the Master Ace. Well, the Master Ace Surf was the all-wheel drive one, right?
Probably, yeah.
You get them in the U.S. market with like the cool little refrigerator in them, and yeah, they were just super neat. Toyota does not make quirky vehicles like that any longer.
No, at least not for North America.
No, that's
not true. Not so much in Japan anymore either. But anyway,
the Sienna is definitely not
enough interruption. No, very conventional.
And it's funny that we say it's old because it's not really even that old. It dates back to what, 2011?
I think so. Yeah,
that is starting to get old now. Now that I think about it, that's 6 years old.
2010.
2010. Oh, it goes back that far.
Yeah.
That is kind of a long time on the market. And the reason why I recommended it in the past was because I feel like it has the best balance for what minivan buyers are looking for. The Odyssey certainly drives fantastic. Even though it's being replaced, the current Odyssey is really good to drive. It drives like an Accord, which is, it's got a little bit of sportiness in it. That's not really what I want in a minivan, and I don't think that's what most people want in a minivan. The Toyota is a little bit squishier, a little bit softer, quieter, more relaxed driving demeanor. And I think, its tech is decent enough to use, where the Hondas just made me want to punch the dash the whole time I was driving it. And it's very spacious, and it does all of those.
As minivans are wont to be.
Yeah, but sometimes it's weird, right? You'll have a van like, say, the Nissan Quest or the Kia Sedona, where they're big, but their space utilization, it's not it's not the best. And they have like these quirks where it's like the way the seats configure and stuff. You go, did they actually try to use this? Because this is weird. You can't, the things that you want to do with it, you can't because of the limitations of how it's designed. The Sienna is not one of those vehicles. It's a good all-arounder, and it does have all-wheel drive, which is handy here in the Northeast where we still get snow. And occasionally we get great springtime April Fool's Day storms. So I was all psyched to take this. We had a dance competition for one of my kids, and so it was outside of Hartford, which is about 80 miles from here, I guess. So I was like, oh, cool. We got the van. We're good to go. It's going to be comfy. We can put the dog in it and everything. Well, it like snowed and iced and did all kinds of crap on Friday. And while it's all-wheel drive, it did not have winter tires on it. So, I was like...
So you were able to spin all 4 tires with ease?
I just left it home. And I took the Jeep, and I did like 40 miles an hour, and it took us 2 hours to get there. And we saw a bunch of accidents, and somebody just in Worcester, so if you've ever driven through Worcester, the highway just does S-curves, because back in the day, when they were doing their urban planning. I know we're getting off track here, but it's a fascinating story. Trust me.
That's something we do frequently.
Right. So there's Holy Cross, I think it's College of the Holy Cross in Worcester. And it's right, the highway that goes through there is Route 290. And back in the 50s, I believe it was Bishop Brosnahan, because it's right by Brosnahan Square. This is super New Englandy, I know. I'm sorry. He refused to split his campus for the highway. And because it was Bishop Brosnahan with the College of the Holy Cross, he won. And so 290 does this giant, like, double reverse S curve through Worcester. Yeah. So anyway, we saw a Corolla just like completely spin out. They did like a 720 right in front of us. I saw it like just about beginning to happen, and I was going slow already, but I just backed off.
Was it one of those really slow motion spins?
It was. It was like
where it seems like it goes on for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, and they were so lucky. They didn't hit anything. They just spun out and scrubbed off all their speed and just came to a stop, and then like took them a second, and they just moved over to the shoulder. And I was like, oh, they're checking their pants. Because that kind of, it's terrifying to be behind the wheel. And then, a few miles later, they come back past us again. And I was like, man, they have not learned. You cannot go that fast in this weather unless you're equipped for it. And they were clearly not equipped for it. So anyway, I did not take the Sienna, but had the Sienna been equipped with winter tires, I'm sure it would have been super solid and great. The stuff that's good about it is that it's pretty comfortable. It's got plenty of power. It's got lots of room and lots of features. And this is the limited, so it's as cushy as Toyota makes it without sort of encroaching on Lexus territory. That's one of the areas where it's not that cushy. They call it the limited, but man, the Pacifica is nice. This is not quite as nice.
You mean in terms of materials, fit and finish, that sort of thing? Materials,
fit and finish, ergonomics are not as good. And just like the design is not as functional. I started searching around for a few things. It seems like there's controls that are hidden and stuff that weren't quite as well thought out. And I'm sure that this is going to be all updated and cleaned up, but the last crop of Camrys and vans and even like the Highlander, it seems like and they fixed some of this. But there was a point in time where they came out with these cars with interiors that were just poorly designed, where the dash didn't seem like it integrated with the doors, and the ergonomics were weird. And this Sienna is still one of those. The dash is this big sort of square thing, and they've tried to gussy it up. It was covered with some leather or pleather, and it was stitched and stuff, but it's just not. Well,
it's
nice.
It's the last of that kind of previous generation of Toyotas, which kind of coincided with just as Akio Toyoda was coming in and taking over as CEO. So it was designed. It was really designed before he took over the reins, and it was very typical of Toyotas of the previous decade, where there was nothing exciting about it. And like you say, there were a lot of odd quirks, sometimes with some of the controls and the ergonomics. But I think aside from the Prius, most newer Toyotas have kind of moved away from that to a more conventional layout. And especially, the new Camry, I think we'll see a lot of influence from that one in the next generation Sienna, probably sometime next year.
That's good. And, hopefully they've injected a little bit of 86 in all their cars too. The driving dynamics are, I think, what really kills it. This is just, and everybody says this about Toyotas, but this is so dull to drive. And the steering is numb. Yet there's this dead spot on center where I started dreaming about ways to add caster angle to it, so it would just track straight ahead. Damn it, so cars that just lock onto straight ahead, generally they have a lot of caster angle. Like BMWs have about twice the caster angle that most other cars do, and the reason why is because that will encourage the front wheels to just straighten out like a shopping cart. Those are casters. You increase that angle where they tilt backward, and the wheels will just naturally pull straight. Toyotas, especially older Toyota, like when I first started doing this auto journalism thing, Toyotas used to be all over the road. They would just constantly require these little steering inputs when you just want to go down the highway, man. This one still does it. The Sienna still does it. And it's gotten better as Toyotas have sort of gone through their generations. And again, I think you're right. The arrival of Akio Toyota helped put a little bit more passion in some of the cars. And, certainly I don't expect the steering to load up in the middle of a corner and give me all kinds of direct feedback to the road and all.
I mean, it is a a minivan. It's a family hauler. Yes. So,
although I will say the Odyssey does that stuff. It's surprising. But
not everybody wants that though,
right? And I think that's my point I was getting toward as I ramble here is it's tuned for the people who want it to be dull. They don't want the van to not be dull. And they did make a little ECT power option available so that the engine would not be so sluggish, because there's just like this giant dead spot in the accelerator right off idle. You pull away from a light and then you're like, why am I still doing 20? And it's electronic throttle mapping and transmission points and stuff, so you can switch it. But I have definitely expended my time talking about the Sienna. So we'll talk about what you are driving. But first I want to say, I heard you on Marketplace this evening, and it was the weirdest thing because I was commuting and all of a sudden your voice comes out of the radio and I was like, it's Sam. And you were on Marketplace talking from your position of power at Navigant about Tesla, which is just cool. And you've been making the rounds so people can catch you out in other media outlets.
Yeah, I've been a little busy today. There's a couple of people that wanted to talk to me about my latest work product from Navigant, but we'll get back to that a little bit later.
Yeah, that's your tease.
Yeah, but my next what I was driving until Saturday morning was the 2017 BMW 530i. Which of course the 5 Series is BMW's midsize sedan. They've got three main sedan lines. You've got the 3 Series, which is the heart and soul of BMW. I mean, that's the bulk of their car volume. Although SUVs are rapidly overtaking cars at BMW, just as they are everywhere else. And then of course at the top end, you've got the 7 Series. The 3, the 3's always been kind of on the tight side, especially in the back seat. It's definitely a smaller sedan. The 7, for a lot of people, it's a big car. It doesn't drive as big as it is, but it's a big car. And then the 5 is, that kind of sweet spot in the middle for, if you actually, if you have a family and you want to haul a couple kids around or, other people around on a regular basis and be more comfortable. And the 5 is all new this year. The design is very much evolutionary from the previous one. Yeah. I mean, the main visual difference really, is in the front, where it no longer has the body colored, or the main color, bodywork around the twin kidney grills. It's adopted the same look as the 3 Series and the X5, where the headlights now butt right up against the chrome surrounds on the grills. And then, you've got small vents behind the front wheels, just like the 7 Series has. Other than that, it looks very much like the previous generation, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
So
I was just going to say it's a handsome car. Yeah. And it is beyond the way the looks have stayed the same, though. This is a significant new 5. It's a new platform as well. It's the G30, right? Versus the outgoing, whatever the hell it was, F something.
Was it F70, I think?
Yeah.
Or was that maybe that was the 3 Series.
They went through the Fs really quick, by the way. Like BMW had E's for like 25 years.
Yeah.
And now
well, I think they skipped a few numbers on the Fs, but at any rate, the 530, is the baseline 5 Series, at least here in North America. And so it's got, like all of its competitors, it's got a 2-liter GTDI 4-cylinder engine, 248 horsepower, which is it's a fabulous engine. And, like all the engines in this segment now, it's got lots of low end torque. It feels strong. And for a car that weighs about 3,700 pounds, it's got plenty of grunt. So
that's surprisingly light.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, even the previous one was actually, reasonably lightweight. I think they cut about 100 pounds overall, from the previous generation. It's got more aluminum in it, more magnesium, and more high strength steels. And like everything else, of course, it's got more features on it. So that adds pounds back on. I can't remember how much they took out of the structure. It was definitely considerably more than 100 pounds, but they offset that by putting more stuff in there. One of the features that the 5 Series has adopted from the 7 Series is the new gesture control system.
Oh yeah, the last time I had a 7, I shut that off right away, which I guess is not the point of being a car reviewer. So I'm sorry. Please send me. No, you're
supposed to use all that stuff, so you can tell people whether it's worth actually spending their money on.
I know, but I'm cranky, and so I'm like, technology. Who needs it? Yeah.
Well, the funny thing is, I mean, it's an interesting concept, and I think someday when we get to autonomous electric cars where you no longer have to have the dashboard right in front of you there because you can move all that stuff away because you don't have a powertrain in front of you. Things like that will actually make a lot of sense. And, putting it in the car now probably is a good way to gauge people's reactions and develop the technology. But as far as actually being useful right now, it's not.
Well, that's why I don't like it. It feels like such a gimmick. It's like those scenes in movies where the actors stand in front of this giant glass panel and they've got, they're typing in thin air. And then, in the special effects, we put in all kinds of stuff, buttons they're touching and stuff. That's such nonsense. And they just won an award, by the way. If it's Bosch that they developed it with, Bosch just won an award.
No, that was Delphi.
Oh, was it Delphi? Okay, so
yeah, Delphi did that gesture control system.
So I saw there was an award from Automotive News or the Tech Awards that I'm following on Twitter. They won for the gesture control. So I thought that was cool. Like it's new tech and it's a new way of interacting with the vehicle. I just personally, I'm not with anything. I don't really use gesture controls. I shut off the extra gestures on my laptop touchpad. I don't use too many on the iPad and stuff like so. I am I'm a Luddite, apparently. But yeah,
I mean, for those out there that don't know how the gesture system works, there's a little camera mounted between the two central vents in the dashboard, and you basically there's about 4 or 5 different gestures that you can do with your hand to do certain kinds of commands. Like, for example, you can stick out your index finger and twirl your finger in a circle, clockwise will turn the volume up, counterclockwise will turn the volume down, which is fine. Except that when you're doing that, your hand is about 2 inches away from the volume knob.
This seems to.
So, why bother?
Right. It's like the elegance of this is like function preceding function. It's just, I know that they have to put it in there and sort of, let people be the beta testers and figure out what they like, what they don't like. iDrive sort of started the same way, right? We're all used to that now, but man, everybody hated it when it was in that first 7 series.
Yeah. And, iDrive is great. Is actually a really good system now. The new 5, has a new user, graphical interface for the iDrive system. I think it's iDrive 6 they're up to now. So it actually works quite well for the most part. It's still not, there's a lot of functionality in those menus. And so sometimes you have to drill down quite a bit to find what you're looking for. But overall, it's definitely improved. And I generally prefer the central controller setups to a touchscreen. But the 5 Series also has a touchscreen, so if you like that, and this is a trend we're seeing in a lot of vehicles, especially in the premium segments, multimodal controls. So they'll give you a touchscreen and a central controller, and in this case, gesture controls, and you can control it however you want.
Well, and I think that's really smart. Obviously, in a premium segment, it's easier to do that because each of those components adds expense and complexity and time to develop. So that's something it's going to proliferate among premium cars before everybody else. But especially with BMW owners, they don't want friction in using their cars. And I know that's kind of a trendy term, but if they have set up multiple ways for the car to accept input, the person who likes the iDrive controller can pick that. The person who just, it seems the most logical to reach out and touch the screen and to have that actually work when they do it, like that's going to please the owner. It's going to help people appreciate BMWs, and it's a very smart move for them to just make the car easy to operate.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other features of this car, unfortunately, my time driving the car was cut short by a couple of days because on Saturday morning, as I was driving home, all of a sudden, a big warning popped up on the display saying low tire pressure, please pull over slowly now. And so, not wanting to take a chance, I did that. And, I was out in a rural area north of town here, and there was nobody around, so I pulled over to the side of the road and went through the menus and checked the tire pressures. Like a lot of new cars today, the 5 Series, will show you the individual pressures at each tire instead of just giving you one icon that says low tire pressure and you have no idea which one it is. So I saw that the right front tire had 0 pressure. I got out, took a look at it, couldn't see anything obviously wrong, pressed my finger against the tread, and it was very much no pressure in there. And so I got back in the car and I called up BMW's roadside assistance through their the BMW connected telematics system, explained what was going on. And they said, yeah, this car has run flat tires on it and I could drive up to 50 miles at up to 50 miles an hour. And since my house was only 12 miles from where I was at that point, I figured, okay, I'll give it a shot. And so I drove home at about 30, 35 miles an hour all the way. And by the time I got home, there was, in fact, a very large chunk making its way loose from the sidewall of the tire. So, this tire was definitely well beyond repair at that point. But it did manage to get me home, which was a good thing because there was no spare tire or even an inflator in the car.
That's a pretty common trend, and I know you wrote this up for Forbes to just discuss some of the highs and lows of this. It's really hard to find a space in these cars for a spare tire and wheel, especially since a lot of the cars have just enormous tire and wheel packages now. I mean, the trunk of this 5 Series it's pretty big actually. It's 19 cubic feet. That's a decent size trunk.
It is, and I mean one of the issues and like for example on this car, it's got staggered wheel sizes, so it's got bigger tires in the front than it does in the back. Yeah. And even on more mainstream cars, having 19, 20-inch wheels, on a family sedan, or an SUV is not at all unusual anymore. So having a place to pack those wheels is it's hard to package those things.
Yeah, I mean, plus, you've got to make the trunk floor is going to come up by what? It's a 20 by 7, 20 by 8-inch wheel, something like that, depending on how wide it is. So that's it goes in the trunk floor. It's got to raise the trunk floor by that much. Like that's no, you're not going to have a 19 cubic foot trunk with a 20-inch spare wheel under there.
Right. And, on hybrids, oftentimes they'll package the battery pack where the spare tire well would go. So that eliminates that space. So almost all hybrids don't have a spare tire, but even a lot of non-hybrids, don't have a spare anymore because, even with a mini spare, the combination of a mini spare and a jack and all the other associated stuff, that can add, 30 to 40 pounds to the weight of a car. And when you consider that, the test weight classes, when they do the EPA certification, when they put the car on the dyno, they set up the dyno based on the weight of the vehicle, to figure out the resistance to simulate what you would be getting on the road. And, instead of, for the settings that they have, they have bins of test weights, so for most car segments, it's usually about 100 pound intervals. And, if you've got a car that's within 25 or 30 pounds of, the bottom of that bin, if you ditch the spare tire and put an inflator kit in there, all of a sudden you can drop down a test weight class. And, that's like dropping 100 pounds off the car for testing purposes, at least. And then, that can often buy you 1, sometimes 2 miles per gallon on your EPA label values. That's
no joke, especially when on a performance car too, or you that can be the difference between a gas guzzler tax and not.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Obviously this 5 Series that you were in, that 2-liter is pretty efficient, even for its power. I mean, that's the same engine as the Minis, right?
In the Mini Cooper or the Cooper S.
Yeah. So it's tuned up.
It's actually a little. It's a higher output version, but it's basically the same engine. I think in the Minis it's about 225 or 230 horsepower.
Yeah.
And you get 248 in this one, but you get better packaging for the exhaust and everything in this one versus the Mini. Right,
which that probably helps uncork the power just a little bit more.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that was a pretty efficient car overall.
Yeah, I mean, it's rated at 27 miles per gallon combined.
That's really good. For big?
And that's a big car.
Yeah.
It's actually bigger than, some of the early 7 Series were, back in the 80s. So it's quite good. And, it's got auto stop start, and current generation auto stop start systems are actually really good. They're pretty seamless, when they shut the engine off and turn it back on again. I know, BMW was one of the first manufacturers to introduce auto stop start here in North America on non-hybrid vehicles. And some of those early systems were pretty bad. I mean, there's a reason why people hated those things, because, you'd get this shudder when the engine shut down and then another shudder when it started back up and it was slow. The new ones are much, much better.
Yeah, there are some cars that still have
start right up.
Yeah, there's some that still have systems like that.
Yeah, there's some out there, but most of them are getting pretty good, and the newer ones are definitely pretty close to seamless. The startups aren't going to be instantaneous, so you want to switch it off if you're going to the drag strip. But other than that, for any normal driving, they're fine. You won't even really notice it most of the time.
Yeah, I think you get used to it. It's funny. I was next to a Porsche Cayman this morning in traffic. And I was like, man, that thing's quiet. And then I realized it's probably auto stop start. And then we all started moving, and he takes his foot off the brake, and you hear it fire up, and off he goes. And I was like, PDK, you wimp. Why would you have a Cayman in a PDK?
Yeah.
It takes all the fun out of it. But yeah, also the 530 it's automatic only, which I mean, I guess that's fine.
Yes.
But that makes me die.
Yeah, you can't get a manual in the new 5 Series anymore. I don't know if they'll put one in the next generation M5 or not. Probably not. No. They've generally been moving away from them. In fact, I think on the last generation M5, the manual was actually, amazingly enough, only available in North America. In Europe, they didn't even bother with it.
Well, because Europeans like the sort of race-inspired transmissions more. I guess I'm grossly generalizing, but that's my take on it is, I mean, you've seen all the exotic car makers transition to the automated gearboxes that they're not automatics, but they're definitely not manuals either. They're certainly more like race car transmissions. And
there's one other thing I want to talk about this car, and it's not exclusive to this one, but this one had the driver assist 2 plus package on it, or plus 2 or something, whatever they call it.
What does that include?
That's the highest end ADAS system, the driver assist systems. So that's, you get your adaptive cruise control with forward collision warning and pedestrian detection. It's got lane following system, your blind spot monitors and all that. What was interesting about it, the lane following system, it's unlike a lot of the lane keeping systems that you can get today. They will, they'll give, if you start drifting out of the lane, it'll give you a little nudge back into the lane, but it doesn't really actively try to keep the car centered in the lane. And this system on the 5 Series actually does try to do that. It's not perfect. You can feel it wandering a little bit, but it doesn't come close to like bouncing off the lane markers on one side and the other. So it's just, you can feel a little bit of drift, but it's pretty comfortable. But the key to it is it's using the camera, the forward-looking camera, to detect the lane markers. And like virtually every system I've tried from every manufacturer, it just cannot do it reliably enough. And they really need to get this sorted out before we can get to higher levels of automation. Because, this was Saturday morning, it was a bright sunny day, perfectly clear. There wasn't no rain, no snow. The road was clear, and it just could not consistently detect the lane markings. When it did detect the lane markings, this lane centering system, like I said, worked pretty well. And I was able to drive, just with a couple fingertips, to give it a little nudge every once in a while to say, hey, yeah, I'm still here. But other than that, it was able to pretty much track on its own when I was driving east-west. When I was driving north-south, it almost could not detect the lane markings at all. So basically, if the sun was shining from the side and reflecting off the lane markings, they became almost invisible to the camera. But if it was either in front of me or behind me, it worked reasonably well. So
that's like a contrast thing, right? Even with the whatever image processing they're doing.
Yeah, it seems to be, and I'm pretty sure it's a Mobileye system that's in there. And Mobileye, of course, is the company that was bought by Intel for $15 billion. And they specialize in image processing, and they do the vast majority of the lane keeping systems that are out on the market today. They've got a lot of good technology, but honestly, it's none of them from any manufacturer I've tried are nearly reliable enough to be used really for autonomous systems, and this one was no exception.
Huh. Well, it'll get better.
I certainly hope so.
There's things they're gonna put in place, like vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure. So wait 25 years and
yeah, I mean next year, in 2018, they're going to be launching their next generation system. Right now, they're on their IQ3. 2018, they're going to bring out the IQ4, their next generation processor and software. Maybe that one will be significantly more robust, but as it is today, these things, from, like I say, from any company, this is not something unique to BMW, and nor even to Mobileye. I mean, even other systems I've tried are just not reliable enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes me think immediately about, if it can't handle differences in lighting conditions, what's it going to do in weather when the lane markings disappear? Obviously, that's the argument is like that is not the appropriate time to be letting the car drive itself. So there's that.
Though, I mean, if we get to a point in time where, all the, everything's being done by autonomous vehicles, and you've got vehicles that don't have a steering wheel or pedals, like what Ford is what Ford has said they're going to build in 2021, and other manufacturers are going in the same direction, then that's going to be, it's going to have to work in those conditions.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of pieces that need to go into place before that happens. It's one thing to have the cars doing all the processing on their own, and each car is an island unto itself. But as we saw with the latest latest Uber incident in Arizona, where all the news frothed at the mouth because an Uber car got in an accident. Like that's not really the big deal. The big deal is that it's a simple situation that an experienced driver would be able to recognize and back off, and yet because it was something that the algorithm couldn't make heads or tails of, or just the software wasn't refined enough. The car managed to just sort of go through an intersection at about 40 miles an hour and wind up in the left-hand driver crash.
Apparently ran a yellow light.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, people do that all the time, but, typically, when humans do it, hopefully, you take a glance and, see if it's clear, see if anybody's coming prematurely from the other direction before you do it. Although, of course, that doesn't always happen. Yeah,
well, and in this situation, I think one of the complicating factors was that there was a line of traffic stopped that blocked the view of the car that caused the accident, which was actually turning left across oncoming traffic. But that driver could also not see the Uber car back a ways either. So it's just, again, it's one of those things where an experienced driver would just say, hey, I can't see past that line of cars. This is, one of those kind of intersections. I'm going to just slow down a little bit. Instead, it went blasting through at like 30 something miles an hour. So,
yeah.
And,
I mean, we've talked about this before a bit. I think, one of the issues with sensors, with relying on the sensors, whether it's cameras or LiDAR or radar or ultrasonic sensors, any of these types of sensors are limited to line of sight. If you can't see through the car in front of you, neither can those sensors.
Right.
So, you're anything that's directly around you, the sensors will be able to detect that. But they can't see down the road past other objects that are blocking the view, just as we can't as humans. But if you add vehicle-to-vehicle communications, now the vehicles can communicate to each other beyond line of sight about their position, their direction, and their speed. And so now you can calculate, am I on a potential collision course with this other vehicle? And you can avoid that, if you do it right, hopefully you can either avoid or at least reduce speed and mitigate the impact. We've seen this now on numerous occasions. I mean, this is one example where V2V might have helped. The fatal Tesla crash last year is another one. When the Google self-driving car ran into a bus in Mountain View, same thing. All of those were situations where there was either something that the sensors could not detect for whatever reason, whether it was beyond line of sight, or it was a situation like what I was just describing with the BMW lane keeping, where the sensors just could not reliably detect, because of challenging lighting conditions. The sensors just could not reliably detect what was there and could not deal with it appropriately.
Yeah, to me, there's a lot of parallels with the sort of live broadcasting. Bear with me because I'm just putting it in my own frame of reference, I suppose. But when you're dealing with a live broadcast, if you've got a live shot or a live interview, say on the radio from somewhere, you've got a couple of you've got backups, right? So you've got your main thing, which let's say, okay, the main sensor that the car uses is the camera because, it's fast and it's the way that it's their preference. Cool. That's sort of like analogous to like your best sounding audio feed, your bonded cellular or ISDN or whatever you want to call it. But you've got a fail safe as well. You've got like that fallback. So when you lose a connection there, it drops back to just a straight, cellular connection or, we call it POTS. It's a plain old telephone service. So you lose a little bit of fidelity, but the mission critical problem of like staying on the air is still there. So that it seems to me that we're only really using sort of one facet. It's a very tortured metaphor, I know, but when it's like a single faceted approach versus a multifaceted approach. I guess you can't really have a single.
No, that's yeah. Well, that's actually a really good analogy for autonomous cars. And that's why most manufacturers are going in the direction of having multiple layers of sensors. That because every one of these sensors has its strengths and weaknesses and the types of things it can detect and what kinds of conditions it can detect in. So radar, for example, can see well through fog, whereas a camera cannot. So the more inputs you have, which includes the sensors, but it also, includes the communications coming into the vehicle to give you, that longer distance view of what might be going on, along your trajectory. That makes the more of that you can add to it, it makes the whole thing more robust. And so you're less vulnerable to a single point of failure.
Yeah. Well, and there's, it makes a lot of sense. You think about airplanes, right? Every airplane has a transponder which identifies it to other airplanes and to air traffic control. And that's hugely important, obviously, if you're dealing with things that fly around in 3 dimensions. Cars seems like it's a little easier, and certainly there's personal privacy issues that have to be sorted out and just reliability and how the cars are going to talk to each other. But it's honestly, technically, it doesn't strike me as a big deal to make all the cars talk to each other and to infrastructure. It doesn't. No,
like and actually, it's not at all. I mean, the hardware is actually pretty straightforward. It's well developed now, and you've got standards for the messaging protocols for how these things talk to each other. There's SAE standards for that. They've been working. In the industry as a whole has been working on this for a decade. And so they've got all that stuff sorted out now. Cadillac is shipping it on the updated CTS. Toyota's been shipping it on a couple of models in Japan since late 2015. And I think, we're going to see a bunch more vehicles coming pretty soon with this capability. And, where it's more problematic is the infrastructure part of it. If you want to do vehicle to infrastructure communications, putting in roadside units, there's a more significant cost for that associated with that. And a lot of municipalities don't have the funding to do that. So they're trying to figure this out, trying to figure out what's the best way to do this. And, it's probably going to come down to public-private partnerships, which, having mentioned that, it's a good point. Good time for me to put a little plug. Next week, I'm going to be in New York for the New York Auto Show. And in conjunction with the show, they're doing the Empire State of Mobility Conference. And I'll be on a panel there with somebody from with Steve Gursky from formerly vice chairman of GM and somebody from Zipcar talking about public-private partnerships and mobility.
Awesome. I mean, it's halfway hilarious that is happening in Manhattan, because if you've ever tried to drive in and out of Manhattan.
That's a nightmare.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's one of the places where they need to figure out some mobility solutions.
Yeah.
And the thing is, different cities, it's not necessarily going to be the same solution in every city. You've got to tailor the solutions to the different areas. Like, for example, here in Detroit, Detroit's got very different problems to deal with than Manhattan or San Francisco or Singapore or London.
Detroit's so spread out compared to how dense New York is in terms of population density.
Yeah. I mean, the city of Detroit, is 137 square miles. And it used to have a population of close to 2 million. Now it's a little under 700,000. So there's large swaths of the city that are extremely low density right now, and other areas that are considerably higher density, now that a lot of people are starting to move back into the city. So, they've got, and the demographics of the city are different. So you've got different problems that you have to come up with different kinds of solutions that are tailored to the community. So what works in Manhattan, not going to work in Detroit or Chicago or San Francisco.
Well, and the kind of projects in the past that have, you describe them as mobility now, but we used to talk about light rail a lot. It's hugely expensive, and by the time you finish, it's obsolete. And then there's upkeep on it too. I expect that the newer mobility technology is going to make a lot more actual mobility possible at a much lower cost. So hopefully, we're hearing chatter of a renaissance of cities to a certain degree, and hopefully this kind of stuff can continue to be a player and drive that to a degree. But talking about all the sensors and the autonomous tech, it's kind of a good time to segue into something that you actually were an author on this week, was the Navigant Research Autonomous Driving Leaderboard. I mangled the title, but
no, that's pretty close. The Autonomous Driving Systems Leaderboard report. So, I think I've mentioned before, my day job, I'm a senior analyst at Navigant Research. It's a market research firm. And so, we look at different technology areas. I work on transportation, particularly on mobility and autonomous vehicles and connected vehicles and all this stuff. And one of the types of reports we do are these leaderboard reports where, most of our reports, involve, looking at the technologies and doing market forecasts, how the technology is going to develop in the marketplace, how many are going to get sold and that sort of thing. But for our leaderboard reports, what we do is we look at the companies in a particular segment, and we come up with a set of criteria, and we grade each of the companies that we're looking at based on these different criteria around strategy and execution. So we're looking at things like the core technologies, their quality, their product strategies, production strategies, sales, marketing, and distribution, company's staying power. I mean, how financially stable is it? And we look at all of that, give a score, 0 to 100 on each one of these. You have different weightings for the different categories, and then come up with an overall composite score, and rank the companies, from best to less than best. And so, for our latest one on autonomous driving systems, what we did was, when we did this, the last time we did this one, in 2015, late 2015, we only looked at car makers and, looked at who was leading, in the development of autonomous vehicles. And the focus then was more on the technology. But this time around, what we did is we expanded the scope to include some other companies, like some suppliers, and companies like Waymo and Uber and Autonomy that aren't traditional car makers. And we ranked them as well. And what we were looking for overall was not just the core autonomous driving technology, but looking at it from a larger perspective of, who's got the technology and also who can commercialize this technology, who's got the right strategy to actually bring it to market. So using that as a background, overall number one, the top two in the rankings were Ford and GM, followed closely by Renault Nissan Alliance and Daimler. You might think, why are these traditional car makers coming out ahead of tech companies like Waymo and Uber and Tesla, for that matter?
Indeed, looking at Twitter, folks we know, Alex Roy and Dave Sullivan have both actually, offered some critique, saying, the report feels, at least in their opinion, to be biased toward manufacturers with infrastructure. And Dave even said that it reads like the release about the leaderboard report reads like Ford bought and paid for it. So I'm not sure that wasn't my impression, but it definitely, seeing Ford be out in front like that, you go, well, why are they out in front? Especially when all of the press has been generated by, like you said, Silicon Valley. What apparently clearly there's other factors you guys are looking at that are determining your rating for their success. You're saying that Ford and GM are going to be, it looks like they're going to actually be a lot more successful than the companies that are generating all of the noise right now.
I think so. And part of that is, I think, some of the keys to success are going to be, having control of the core technologies that make up this stuff. So that's one component of it. And certainly, for Waymo and also even for Tesla, they're doing that. They're developing a lot of the stuff in-house. Waymo has developed their complete set of sensors on their own internally to build, that they want to incorporate as part of their overall system. But they're not the only ones doing this. Ford has been investing. They put $75 million into Velodyne last year. For a stake in Velodyne, they bought a company called Sapes, that an Israeli startup that's doing image processing. They invested in a company called Civil Maps. GM's been investing in a bunch of companies. They bought Cruise Automation. So what we're seeing is the companies that are bringing this core technology in-house and will have the ability to really manage that. I think that's going to be one key component of success. But the other thing is, you actually have to be able to make vehicles in mass, reliably, distribute them, service them, and provide them to consumers through mobility services. And so, Waymo, for example, they had the best overall score as far as their technology, but they don't have any manufacturing capability. They're going to have to partner with somebody to actually build vehicles, and that's going to be a big investment. So, and Uber, same thing. They, actually their core technology, despite the fact that they may or may not have gotten something that was designed by Waymo, it actually doesn't appear to be working all that well, based on what we've seen of late. And, they don't have any manufacturing capability. And, for them to either build or purchase vehicles is going to be enormously expensive. And it's going to be a lot easier for companies that are actually building stuff to replicate what Uber does than the other way around. And then, one of the big questions, that one person in particular has been asking tonight on Twitter, is about Tesla. And Tesla, they have some very advanced technology with their autopilot system, but I think it's also much more limited than virtually every other company in this ranking, because they absolutely refuse to use LiDAR. And as we talked about earlier, the absence of that particular layer of sensing capability, I think is going to be crucially important. I think that's going to be necessary to get the level of robustness you need to move towards full automation. I mean, Elon Musk has said their current Autopilot version 2 hardware suite will allow them to get to level 5 capability. And the definition of level 5 capability is that the vehicle can operate anytime in any weather conditions, any road conditions, fully autonomously without a driver.
I kind of doubt that that's the case without LiDAR.
And I do not believe that this generation of autopilot hardware will be able to do that. I mean, it will be able to operate fully autonomously under certain conditions, certain limited conditions, but it will never get to full autonomous capability, to the way these other systems will.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I keep coming back to is that automakers have been at this a really long time, and despite the fact that they are now an old line industry, I guess, when you're comparing them to, Silicon Valley, they know how to build cars. They have supplier relationships. They have engineers. They know how to test. They know how to, validate. And they're careful about when they release stuff. So part of it is that you're seeing an automaker be pretty sure that their stuff is going to work. It's not going to hurt anybody. They're not going to use the public as beta testers. You've seen a lot more recklessness on the part of even Tesla, releasing stuff that basically uses its owners as the test fleet.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I have never thought that was a good idea. But, it's not my decision to make. I would not want to see most people being beta testers for this sort of capability, because I think, and especially the way it's been talked about by many people, there are those, there are certain authors, certain writers who can insist on calling autopilot as it exists today self-driving cars, and it's not. These are not self-driving cars. They cannot drive on their own anywhere. They have. They're very advanced driver assist systems, but the driver still has to be there.
How do we make that point? Because it's almost like a parlor trick, right? Like they're good enough where they can drive with virtually no driver involvement in the right conditions. You could make a whole trip.
Well, that's the key to it. There is the right conditions. And going back to what I talked about earlier with the BMW, there's a lot of conditions that aren't right, where these systems just do not work reliably. I think to imply that they're more capable than they really are does a disservice to consumers. And it's potentially dangerous because it leads people to believe that these systems can do things they can't. And then people get, when people think their technology is able to do things that it's not capable of, they start to get careless, and they do things that they shouldn't be doing, or they don't pay enough attention, when they're driving. And it's not restricted to driving. I mean, it happens in all kinds of different technologies, but particularly, in the vehicle where, there's the potential for life and death. I think that it's, we need to take more care in how we talk about these things and how we describe these things.
Yeah. Well, but I mean, you're not going to make the big marketing splash if you don't say, and I don't know that that's necessarily there's any nefarious purpose out there. I think also one of the other pillars of success for this, and you guys point out in the release about the leaderboard as well, is that automakers have a sustainable business without developing self-driving tech. They're doing it because they understand where the future goes, and if you don't offer the features, especially with what may happen with car ownership, they have to kind of have that stuff in the works. But they have the financial wherewithal to develop those systems while also running a business that actually makes money, even though sales came out and we're a little off right now. Still at like 16 something million adjusted rate.
Yeah, it was about 16.5. Yeah.
So I mean that's not a bad market, but it's not 18. But
it's better than 10.
Exactly. But automakers they're well poised because they build cars at scale and they make profits. Now they have assets to sell. They actually make something instead of some software.
And they know how to do it reliably.
Well, and I guess too, I should say,
which is something that Tesla has also not been particularly good at. That was one of the areas where we knocked them down, is on product quality and reliability. They've had a lot of issues, and I think when the Model 3 launches, if they don't have a flawless launch of that vehicle, the customers that are going to be buying that one are going to be a lot tougher on Tesla than those that, pay $100,000 or more for a Model S or a Model X.
We had that conversation in our back channel chat today. Was the Model S and even the Model X, like they're sort of attainable exotics in a way. They have this cachet about them. The buyers are early adopters still. It's a fashion piece, very much like something like a Ferrari would be. So your owners are apologists to a certain degree for the vehicle's shortcomings. It's not a bug; it's a feature kind of thing, and they're just they're willing to put
And going right back to the beginning of this episode, talking about Toyota and the Sienna, Camry and Corolla are great examples. I mean, between those two, that's 700,000 units a year, every year that they sell just in the United States. And then probably another 500,000 or more globally of those at least. So that's every year Toyota is selling just those two models. They're selling 10 times as many as Tesla has in their best years. And the reason people buy those, they're not exciting, they're not exotics, but they work every day. You get in, you put in the key, you press the start button, you put it in drive, and you go, and it gets you where you want to be.
Everything works, and it's super benign. It's reliable. They hold up. It's all those superlatives about Toyota. They're not exciting, like you say. They're not sexy, but that's so hard to do. And they cost what, $25,000. You can get a Camry. You can get a really nice Corolla for that. Tesla's going to have a real tough problem because that's a different buyer. That's not the apologist buyer. And you would think that somebody buying a $25,000 electric car would go, oh yeah, I mean, I'm going to miss out on some stuff, but that's not how it works. It's actually inverse of how you'd expect. The person buying the really expensive one is willing to put up with some pain, and they have other cars, and it doesn't really mess with their life that much. But the person buying the $25,000 electric car expects it to work just like a Camry all the time. And that's not, that's not where it's at yet. I'm glad that Tesla's going there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I give Tesla huge credit, for pushing the industry forward, both on electrification and on automation. But I still remain unconvinced that they can execute at the level that's going to be needed for them to become a profitable and sustainable business as a car maker. And that's where they lost a bunch of points on this ranking. That's why they came at so low, I think 12th place out of 18 companies in this ranking. They lost on things like that, and things like quality and reliability and sustainability as a business.
Yeah. So, and if somebody wants to know more, I don't want to give away the whole report now. I mean, there's certainly lots of info in it. But it's available from Navigant if you wanted to go check it out.
For a modest fee.
Yes, for a modest, always a modest fee.
Yes.
This is a tech heavy episode. I wanted to just sort of introduce a new project I have. So one of the things I really like about the Crown Victoria is how low tech it is. It's delightful in the sense that it's such a dumb car. It has one or two computers in it. It has the engine management and the ABS computer, and I think that's about it.
There's probably a few more, but those are the main ones: the powertrain and chassis computer.
Oh yeah, there's probably a transmission computer too, and yeah. But power, I guess that would be tied together. Power depends on how they did it.
I think, what year is yours?
99.
Yeah, I think it's got a combined powertrain controller that manages the engine and the transmission.
Yeah, that would be my guess. But there's not, it's not, you know, there's no serial bus communication in this car or anything. It's pretty basic. That's great as far as it goes. Nostalgia is okay. I live in a really rich radio market, and even at that, you know, point, I sometimes wind up going, man, this car would really be great if it had, you know, an ability to play podcasts or you know, like phone calls with Bluetooth. That would also be excellent. And, you know, it has a cassette deck, so I could get one of those little Bluetooth cassette adapter things, and I guess I could do that, but they sound bad. And I got a press release from a company. It was the Epsilon group of companies, and they make a bunch of aftermarket audio stuff, Performance Power, and a couple of other brands as well, Power Acoustic. So like low to high end. They introduced a new line of radios, and so I reached out and I said, "Hey, that's really interesting. Do you have one I can try out?" So they sent me one, and I'm gonna install it in the Crown Victoria, and we'll try it out and see how it does. Putting some touches of modern technology into the old vehicle, because that's an area that you know, this modern tech actually, it is useful, and you don't realize it even when you're a cranky old guy like me until you miss it, until it's not there. And you know, the Bluetooth phone is actually, I feel that that's a safety feature. So I'm not holding the phone up to my head trying to drive. Like,
no, it absolutely is.
I mean, I don't necessarily talk on the phone all the time when I drive. There are a lot of people who do. But when I do need to make or take a call, it's really handy to just be able to drive and at least have my hands on the wheel. I'm still being distracted by the phone, but that's a different story. So yeah, I'm gonna make a video or two, write up some info, and it may be interesting to people, and sort of how you can benefit from some of this technology getting more widespread and cheaper, even if you're not upgrading your car. So
how much does that head unit cost?
I think it's actually pretty inexpensive. The one that they sent is the NS651, which is one of their new ones. So it's like a 300 watt head unit, which is pretty powerful. I think it's under $200.
Wow.
Actually. I could be wrong on that. I will get all the specs, but it's not that expensive.
Yeah, that is pretty reasonable. Because, you know, last year or the year before, I tried out one of Pioneer's head units that they offer. It's an aftermarket unit that's got Android Auto and Apple CarPlay support in it. It was the first aftermarket unit available that had both of those in there. And, you know, the Android Auto and CarPlay, you know, worked fine. It, you know, worked about the same as on any of the OEM systems. And in fact, it was available before almost any of the OEM systems were out there. But the rest of the unit itself, you know, I mean, the least expensive one, the one that I tried, was about $700, and the screen in the thing was just terrible. You know, it was a resistive touch screen, and it had low contrast, and you know, when light hit it, you know, from almost any angle, you had a lot of glare, and it was very hard to see.
Yeah. This also has a touch screen, so that's one of the things I want to see, is like how dim can I get the screen at night as well. That's a big point of contention for me. I feel like there's too much light pollution in cabins. So this is it's the NISA 651 NS 651. It's a doubled in 6.5 inch screen. It starts at 150, and I don't know if I'll have to look. I may have the model with navigation, which is obviously going to be a little higher price, but yeah, it starts at 150. So we'll see. But again, it's like this stuff's getting cheap, and it's still pretty functional. So I'm curious to see.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see how well that one works out. I mean, you know, there's several brands out there now, and most of the big aftermarket audio companies, Kenwood, Alpine, and JVC, all the other ones, they all have touchscreen units, and even basic head units that, don't have touchscreens, still have physical controls, pretty much everything now, except for like the dirt cheapest ones, have at least Bluetooth capability. And, in most cases, when with the Bluetooth, it's usually got play, pause, fast forward, reverse buttons, so if you've got your phone connected to it via Bluetooth and you're listening to a podcast or listening to some music, you can, tap on the head unit, to play, pause, and reverse. I've had, in my wife's car, when the original, factory radio died a couple of years ago, I put, a Pioneer, like $120 Pioneer head unit in there, and it has all that capability, and as do most of them now.
Yeah, and like that's the thing. It's actually aftermarket. It's tough to shop for an aftermarket head unit these days because a lot of them are really garish and like difficult to use.
Oh yeah, tell me about it.
They all have a lot of functionality. Even the lowest price ones have pretty much everything you need or want. And I was originally thinking of a single DIN unit. Because they can't force you to use the touchscreen, so they have to have the physical buttons.
But they have physical DIN. They have single DIN units with touchscreens now too.
Yeah, I had been out of this aftermarket thing for a while, and like looking at the level of sophistication that you can buy in aftermarket audio and technology for your car is astounding. It's come quite a long way in, I'd say, 10 or 15 years. But yeah, I could get a nice cheap singled in with I was looking at tuner sensitivity performance because that's, again, I'm an old man, so I listen to radio, even AM. So all those things are.
They still have radio?
Yeah. Radio. AM's badass, man. AM broadcasts in Class A. It may not be Class A anymore, but yeah, AM transmitters are no joke. But that's a completely different sidetrack that I'm not going to take tonight. So yeah, stay tuned. I'll be making some videos and some stuff with that. I think the last thing we should touch on, because we're talking about it already, really, is Tesla's valuation, which is probably kind of high for a company that doesn't make any profit.
Irrational exuberance. Let's move on.
All right, what was on the list? So I wanted to just cover it.
We did.
Sweet. There are some questions. Did you have any teed up? I have one from Facebook.
I think we had two, right? We had there was the EV question, and then we had let's hit that one first, and then we'll finish up with Dan's question.
All right. Well, this one came in via Facebook. It says, Dan, Sam, I'm interested in good electric cars. I'd be really interested in a good electric pickup, as would I. Electric minivans as well. But how would the grid handle widespread electrification? I just signed up for electric bill credits for decreasing my use during peak hours this summer in suburban Michigan. What kind of burden will that put on the system in areas that already might be prone to brownout? What's the scope of additional infrastructure needed if we all go electric? Well,
if you ask the utilities, they will almost all say we've got plenty of capacity. We can handle, huge numbers of EVs, and
I think that's true.
Yeah, and for the most part, but that doesn't necessarily apply 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. There are times, when there's peak loads, when you definitely don't want to be plugging in your vehicle, at least not until some point in the future when we, actually get vehicle to grid implemented. But that's a whole nother story. But yeah, I think most utilities can definitely handle it, especially if you're charging at night. Which is, what's generally recommended for home charging, because that's the off peak times. That's, when there's the least amount of load on the system.
Yeah, I mean that's why my dishwasher has a delay start time kind of thing as well. And you run your washer and dryer that. Yes, that's been a trick for a long time. Is you get the off peak hours.
Yeah, and pretty much all EV, modern EVs, will let you schedule, when you want, you plug it in, pull into the garage and plug it in, and then you can schedule it to actually start charging, at some specified time when your utility switches to off peak rates, and in a lot of cases, you can do that manually. There are some vehicles that, I don't know if they still do it. I know when Ford first launched, their plugins, the Focus Electric and the Fusion and C-Max plug-in hybrids, they had a program, I can't remember who it was now, but their system would actually go out and contact a database, based on your location and find the local utility. So basically it would do it automatically. So you just tell it, to do, I think they called it value charging or something. And I think there were a couple of other OEMs that had something similar as well. So, you can check, on different vehicles for that, but at the very least, you can always do it manually. And almost all of them have an app that'll let you do that. So you can set the time you want it to charge. So that part isn't a problem. Where things can get dicey, is, if you do live in an area that does get a lot of brownouts, getting an EV might not be a great idea right now until your local utility gets that resolved. I mean, we had a huge windstorm that came through Southeast Michigan a couple of weeks ago. It knocked out power to over 1 million households, across Michigan. It was DTE's biggest outage ever, aside from the massive Northeast blackout of, was it 2003?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
That was a big one. Yeah, I remember that.
But this was the biggest one ever, caused by weather, and a lot of people were without power for 4 or 5 days before they got it restored. So if you live in an area that is prone to a lot of brownouts or outages, I would recommend, if you do want an EV, get some solar panels too. That's the one way you can be sure that you're not going to be putting load on the grid. And, at least you're, aside from, what it costs you for the panels, you're not going to be paying any extra to charge your vehicle.
Right. And, the issue with solar panels is they work when the sun's shining. So if you're not charging during the daytime, you're still going to be drawing off the grid at this point. If you charge at night,
unless you have batteries,
right. If you have storage, that's a different story. If you're charging it at night, you're not going to have any problem with the electric credits for decreasing your peak hour use unless and until at some point when everybody has EVs in some utopian future, the nighttime charging hours become the peak hours because everybody's charging, because that could happen, although I highly doubt it will actually happen. There will be additional infrastructure necessary if we go all electric. I mean, even now there's additional infrastructure and upkeep needed even without electric cars. The Northeast power grid, as an example, we talked about it earlier. It's old. And, we've got this large scale, slow, steady grid that's designed for, generation in somewhat remote areas. The generation stations are large and they're located away from populations for the most part. They're definitely not in the middle of the city. So the power needs to be transmitted. And so that's how our system is set up now. We buy power from Canada and we move things around. And adding solar to the grid will help. It can help. The problem again is storage. And what happens to the grid to freak it out is anything sudden. It's a slow, steady thing. They just want to be, at their demand with, nothing freaking it out. What took out the Northeast in 2003 was there were some tree branches that sagged into some transmission lines. and took those transmission lines out. With the generators went over speed, so they shut down. And it's just at that point, it's a cascade, and it took a couple of days to bring everything back up again once they found the problem, fixed it. And that was actually just a maintenance thing. That was corporate interests had bought into, because power is a big thing. They had cut back their budgets on, say, trimming the trees.
No, you must be joking, Dan. They would never do something like that, would they?
Yeah, they would. And I will say I have a very good source inside the power industry, who talks about it with me from time to time, and just the amount of skinflint operations that are there with. And
just in case anyone from Navigant is listening, it's not me.
No, it is not you. I don't think anybody in his company listens either. And I'm not identifying his company. He's worked for a couple, but it's my brother, and he works in nuclear power. And and even here in Massachusetts, we have one nuke station still, Pilgrim. They're going to shut it down, and from all I just pick up on the news is just like it's another one of those things that's poorly managed, and cost cutting has gotten to the point where we'll replace stuff that breaks, but we won't do as much preventive. You try to do as much preventive on an outage as you can because the plant's down and it's costing money. But anyway, I've again gotten us off track. The grid
is your specialty.
Well, yes, I think the grid adding capacities that's coming. There's been a lot of really interesting stuff with batteries. We were actually talking again in the back channel. There's a battery company that's come up with basically batteries made out of dirt, so they're much less expensive. I don't think they're really going to work really well in a car, but
for stationary storage, though,
yeah, that sounds really promising.
You can have different kinds of batteries for different applications. Obviously, in a car, you want much higher energy density and capacity than you would for stationary storage. But for storing the energy from a large solar or wind installation, it doesn't matter how big it is, really.
And that's the key. Even storing energy from freaking coal or from a hydro, setup is important because that just smooths out the peaks and valleys of demand and supply. It's really there is no more real time industry than the generation and transmission of electric power. And
the traditional ways of producing power or producing electricity, at least from fossil fuels, from hydroelectric, you can manage the output a little better, but from fossil fuels, you tend to not want to spin those up and spin them down. You want to keep them running steady, and so when you've got overcapacity or undercapacity, that's when you start running into problems. And I think that this is a topic I think we can come back to at some point. Have a talk about vehicle to grid infrastructure, because there's some interesting stuff there that could help eventually.
All right. Well, we also burned about 15 minutes on one question, so let's finish off with the other.
Okay, this one should be quick. Dan asked on Facebook, it's Cars and Coffee season now, at least in warmer climes. Do you two ever go to Cars and Coffee? Dan?
No, I hate people. No.
I do occasionally. Where I live near Ann Arbor, the big Cars and Coffee around here is at Pastiner's AutoZone Hobbies in Birmingham, which is about a 45-minute to an hour drive away from me. So it's a bit of a haul, especially to get there at 8:00 on a Saturday morning. And so if the weather's really nice out and I have something interesting to drive, I will do that. Otherwise, I just stay in bed.
I also have you have the flexibility to do it. I have kids who are
my kids are gone, so I can do it whenever I feel like.
Yeah. I also discovered they're not real fans of car shows. So you get waking up early and car show together. Yeah. It's just they're not ready yet.
I take my dog.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I should try that. My dog is the favorite one. If I had the dog before I had kids, I would not have had kids. So I think we've killed a podcast because it's been like we've got a nice pithy collection of topics, and we should give it a rest.
Okay.
So yeah, what Facebook? Please reach out. Continue to reach out. That's great. Share with your friends. Help us out. Give us some shouts and share the podcast so that we can build our listener base, because it's fun to do and it's fun to hear from everyone. So definitely hit us up with comments there. You can find us at Wheelbearings Cast, no vowels except for the A, on Twitter. You are Sam Abu Al Samid on Twitter. I am Boston_Auto. I think those are all the ways to find us easily. I'm probably missing something.
Pretty much. Let's see what else. I'll be in New York next week for the auto show, and we'll try and record something from there. I don't think Dan's going to be able to make it down, but
I was going to try, but something blew up. So
well, we'll get something recorded for you next week from New York with the news of what everybody's announcing there, and talk to you then.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.
See ya. Right.
That was a good one. That was a good one. I actually planned ahead. It was actually helpful to write that thing about
Owning a boat comes with a number of perks, like being able to say ahoy or land ho and not feel weird about it. So here's another perk. Geico's boat insurance offers access to the largest towing fleet on the water. And with specialist support from agents that are as passionate about boating as you are, there's so much value that you'll want to say, shiver me timbers, and not feel weird about that either. Get more with Geico.